Remember, some words got exchanged. Next thing I know, I heard 3 gunshots.
Victim Jaselyn Horne and the defendant Maleek Crosby had been arguing on the job all day. At one point, Crosby cursed at Horne and she threw a pan at him, striking him in the face. He then shot her 5 times, killing her.
I'm okay that in your story, I'm the villain, because you the clown in mine. A whole clown.
Jaselyn Horne died early Sunday morning after being shot several times at a cookout in Northwest Charlotte. This happened at the location on Sunset Road.
Somebody just got shot inside the building. The voice on the 911 call is shaking, panicked, disbelieving.
Medicine County Fire, what's the address of your emergency?
It's the cookout on Sunset Road.
What's that address?
I'm not sure the address. Somebody just got shot inside the building.
Stay tuned as we reveal everything about this case. Drop a comment and let me know what you think about this story. Welcome to our channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Like and share this video to help raise awareness and spread caution. Let's begin. 26-year-old Jaselyn Horne lies dead inside the restaurant. 5 gunshots ended her life. Her co-worker, 20-year-old Maleek Crosby, has fled the scene. And what began as a workplace argument, the kind that happens in restaurants, retail stores, and offices every single day, has ended in a way that will haunt this community forever. This is a story of how 2 people who clocked in for the same shift would never clock out together, how words turned to violence, how violence turned to death, and how one moment of rage destroyed 2 families. This is a cookout tragedy. Jaselyn Horne was 26 years old. She was a mother, she was someone's daughter, and she was doing what millions of Americans do every day, working hard to survive. Jaselyn had a son. Being a single mother is one of the toughest jobs in the world, and she knew it firsthand. She worked multiple jobs to provide for him, to put food on the table, to keep a roof over their heads. The overnight shift at Cookout on Sunset Road was one of those jobs. She'd been there for about 4 or 5 months, working through the night while most of Charlotte slept. Her father, John Horne, would later speak about his daughter with a grief that was almost unbearable to witness. "That's my firstborn," he said, his voice heavy with pain. Coping with her death was, in his words, real tough. The kind of tough that doesn't get easier with time. The kind that sits in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. But Jaselyn's life hadn't been easy. She had faced struggles that many of us can't begin to understand. In June 2021, 3 years before her death, she was arrested and charged with attempted first-degree murder in connection with a stabbing incident. The details of that case aren't widely known, but the charge itself tells a story of violence, of conflict, of a moment when things went terribly wrong. She wasn't a perfect victim, and that's important to acknowledge. Real life doesn't deal in perfect victims or perfect villains. Real life is complicated, messy, full of people trying to get by despite the weight of their past mistakes. By 2024, Jaselyn was working at Cookout, trying to move forward. She had responsibilities. She had a child to care for. Whatever demon she was fighting, whatever struggle she carried, she got up and went to work. And on March 17th, 2024, she went to work for the last time. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. Have you ever worked an overnight shift just to make ends meet? Have you ever felt the weight of trying to provide for your family while the world sleeps? Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Your story matters. Maleek Crosby was 20 years old when this happened. Just 20. Still young. Still figuring out life. He worked at the same Cookout location as Jaselyn. And here's what makes this case so haunting. Maleek had no prior criminal record, no history of violence, no arrests, no red flags that would make anyone think this person is dangerous. He was, by all accounts, just a 20-year-old working at a fast food restaurant in Charlotte, the kind of young person you'd see every day and never think twice about. Someone who clocked in, did his job, and clocked out. We don't know much about his background. His family hasn't spoken publicly in detail. His friends haven't given interviews. What we do know is that he stayed out of trouble. He wasn't involved in gangs. He wasn't known to police. He was living a relatively quiet life. But on March 17th, 2024, something inside him snapped. That's what makes this story so unsettling. Because if it can happen to someone with no history of violence, if a 20-year-old with a clean record can pull a gun and fire 5 shots in a moment of rage, then it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about anger, about weapons, about how quickly a normal day can turn deadly. Maleek Crosby and Jaselyn Horne were co-workers. They worked the same shift. They cleaned the same grills. They mopped the same floors. And on that Sunday morning in March, their conflict would leave one of them dead and the other facing decades in prison. 2 people, same workplace, different backgrounds, but their paths collided in the worst possible way. The cookout on Sunset Road had closed at night. The last customers had been served. The registers had been counted. Now it was time for the overnight crew to clean up and get ready to go home. But Jaselyn Horne and Maleek Crosby had been arguing, not just for a few minutes. They'd been going back and forth the entire shift. Hours of tension, hours of words. The kind of argument that co-workers dread because it fills the whole space with discomfort. We don't know exactly what started it. Maybe it was something work-related. Maybe it was personal. Maybe it was both. What we do know is that as the night wore on, the argument didn't cool down. It heated up. By the time 5 a.m. rolled around, things had escalated to name-calling. The kind of insults that cut deep. The kind that make your blood boil. The kind that make you want to do something you'll regret. And then Jaselyn threw a pan at Maleek. Not tossed. Threw. With force. With intent. It was a physical escalation in an already volatile situation. In her mind, maybe she was defending herself. Maybe she was trying to make a point. Maybe she was just so angry that she acted without thinking. But Maleek responded in the worst way possible. He pulled out a gun. And he fired. Not once. Not twice. 5 times. 5 gunshots echoed through that restaurant in the early morning hours. By the time the shot stopped, Jaselyn Horne was on the ground. When paramedics arrived, they pronounced her dead at the scene. There was nothing they could do. 5 bullets had ended her life in seconds. The other employees were in shock, terrified, trying to process what had just happened. One moment they were cleaning up after a long shift. The next moment, their co-worker was dead on the floor.
She's a very cool person, loving, you know what I'm saying, offering everybody rides home. In my eyes, she couldn't do nothing wrong. She was very vocal. She loved singing at work, making time go by. So other than, I got nothing but good memories. Nothing but good memories.
I just did not see this coming at all.
Kashara McNair works at the cookout and tells me she knew both the victim as well as the alleged gunman and says none of what happened makes any sense.
Both of them was very great people, so this is really foreseen. Everybody, but everybody, get to that point where they can't take it anymore, I guess.
Charlotte-Mecklenburg police say a workplace argument led to the homicide when the suspect pulled a gun and allegedly shot Jaselyn Horne while the two worked together at this cookout on Sunset Road.
Everybody was in a good mood that night. I would have never expected to wake up to this.
Employees tell me the store has a no weapons policy, so the suspect shouldn't have been carrying a firearm that morning. Despite what happened, employees tell me everyone involved were good people.
When police arrived at the cookout, they found everyone who had clocked in for that shift, except Maleek Crosby. He was gone. He'd fled the scene immediately after the shooting. But running wouldn't change what happened. Running wouldn't bring Jaselyn back. Running wouldn't erase those 5 shots. For those who worked at that cookout, the relationships they'd built felt almost like family. They spent so many hours together, night after night, that bonds formed. And now, one of their own was dead. Killed by another member of that family. The 911 calls from that morning captured the terror, the confusion, the desperate realization that someone had just been murdered at work. Voices shaking, trying to explain to dispatchers that yes, this really happened. Yes, someone is dead. Yes, we need help now. This brings me to a question for you. Do you think workplace arguments are taken seriously enough? Have you ever felt unsafe at work? Have you ever been in a situation where a disagreement got out of hand? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department responded quickly. A shooting at a cookout restaurant. One victim dead. One suspect fled. When officers arrived and spoke to witnesses, the story became clear almost immediately. Every employee who had been working that shift was present and accounted for, except one, Maleek Crosby. He was the only person missing. And according to everyone at the scene, he was the shooter. There was no mystery here. No whodunit. The witnesses were clear. The evidence was clear. Maleek Crosby had shot Jaselyn Horne multiple times and then ran. Police issued a warrant for his arrest. They released his name and photo to the public. And on March 18th, just one day after the shooting, Maleek Crosby was taken into custody. He didn't resist. He didn't try to flee the city. He was arrested without incident and charged with murder. The investigation didn't take long because it didn't need to. The facts were straightforward. Multiple witnesses, forensic evidence, the location of the crime. Everything pointed to Maleek as a shooter. But while the question of who did it was answered immediately, the question of why was more complicated. What drives a 20-year-old with no criminal history to pull a gun and shoot someone 5 times? What was going through his mind in that moment? For months after the shooting, the case moved through the legal system. Maleek Crosby was initially charged with murder. If convicted, he could have faced decades in prison, possibly life. But on October 24th, 2024, 7 months after Jaselyn's death, Maleek Crosby stood in court and pleaded guilty, not to murder, to voluntary manslaughter. He accepted a plea deal. And with that plea deal came a sentence, 71 months in jail, just under 6 years. Let's break down what voluntary manslaughter means. It's not the same as premeditated murder. Voluntary manslaughter is an intentional killing that happens in the heat of passion, often after some kind of provocation. The law recognizes that while the killing was intentional, it wasn't planned. It was a reaction in the moment, an explosion of rage that led to death. In Maleek's case, the legal argument was clear. He didn't wake up that morning planning to kill Jaselyn. He didn't bring a gun to work with the intent to shoot her. But when she threw that pan at him, when the argument reached its peak, he reacted with deadly force. The plea deal meant Maleek avoided a trial. It meant both families were spared the trauma of sitting through weeks of testimony, of reliving every horrible detail. It meant certainty. He would go to prison, and the case would be closed. But was justice served? That's a question with no easy answer. Some people might look at 6 years and think it's far too light for taking a life. Jaselyn Horne is dead. Her son will grow up without a mother. Her father will never see his firstborn again. And the person who killed her will be out of prison in less than a decade, still young enough to rebuild his life. Others might see a 20-year-old who made a catastrophic decision in a moment of rage. A young man with no history of violence who will now carry the weight of this killing for the rest of his life. 6 years in prison, plus a lifetime of guilt and regret. Reports indicate that Maleek showed remorse, that he understood the gravity of what he'd done, that he accepted responsibility by pleading guilty. But remorse doesn't bring Jaselyn back. Remorse doesn't ease the pain of her family. Remorse doesn't undo those 5 shots. The legal case is closed. The judge made the ruling. Maleek Crosby is serving his sentence. But for everyone affected by this tragedy, the emotional case will never truly close. John Horne lost his firstborn daughter. The pain in his voice when he spoke about Jaselyn was the kind of pain that no parent should ever have to feel. Real tough, he said, describing what it's like to cope with her death. But those 2 words don't even begin to capture the depth of that loss. Jaselyn left behind a young son, a little boy who will grow up with only memories and stories about his mother. He'll never have another birthday with her, never have another hug, never hear her voice again. And as he gets older, he'll have to grapple with the complicated truth of how she died. The employees at Cookout were devastated. These were people who worked side by side with Jaselyn and Maleek. They spent countless hours together in that restaurant, forming bonds that felt almost like family. And now, one member of that family was dead, killed by another. The grief was compounded by the trauma of what they witnessed, what they heard, what they'll carry with them forever. Maleek's family also faces unbearable pain. Their son, their brother, their loved one is in prison for killing someone. His future is gone. The life he could have had is over. And they have to live with the knowledge of what he did. The Charlotte community responded with a mix of emotions. There was sympathy for Jaselyn, a single mother working hard, trying to provide for her son, whose life was cut short at just 26. There was also acknowledgement of the complexity. She had escalated the situation by throwing a pan, and she had a history of violence herself. Some people saw this as a tragedy with no heroes and no villains. Just two people who made terrible choices in a moment of anger, and one of them paid with her life. Others debated the fairness of the sentence, the role of self-defense, the presence of a gun in a workplace. The conversations were painful and divisive because the truth is, there are no winners here. Only loss, only grief, only families trying to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Jaselyn Horne was 26 years old, a mother, a daughter, a co-worker. She had her whole life ahead of her. She's gone now. Her life ended by 5 gunshots in a place where she showed up to work. Maleek Crosby was 20 years old, no criminal history, a young man with a future. Now he'll spend years behind bars, and for the rest of his life, he'll be known as the person who killed Jaselyn Horne. 2 families have been destroyed. 1 community is mourning. And for what? An argument. Words, anger, pride. May Jaselyn Horne rest in peace. May her son find comfort and strength. May her family find healing. And may we all take this story as a warning about the deadly cost of letting anger win. If this story affected you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And please, drop a comment below. What's the most important lesson you're taking away from Jaselyn's story? We'll be reading every single one. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, no argument is worth your life.